Hi there, Simon Atkins here. What I want to talk to you about today is timing your purchase. This is a huge part of property investment, huge part of creating your wealth. It's absolutely a must. It's a fundamental part of investing and something that you really need to deeply understand. And this is why most people fail at investing. It's like going into the stock market, not understanding what you're doing. Going into the property market is the same thing. You need to get what you're doing. You need to have an understanding of at least the fundamentals. And the property cycle is one of those. So as a lot of people have heard, property moves in cycles. Economies move in cycles, and it's no different. So you have to understand, I call it like the summer, the winter, the spring, the autumn coming. They all come. All these things come and go, and it moves in a cyclic pattern. So you need to understand, or at least have a rough idea of the property cycles, so that you can understand when the right time to purchase is. So we're going to go onto my trusty whiteboard here and have a look at a bit of a model that I'm going to draw up here. Pretty basic, but it explains it quite well. So if we look at this as the property market rising, okay, over a period of time, and as it goes up, your property grows. So this doesn't happen all the time, and it doesn't necessarily happen in a process like that in a linear kind of a fashion, but you'll find that during a growth cycle, during what I call a major growth cycle, and they can be anything from about 12 to 15 or 16 years apart. This is a major growth cycle, and they can last anywhere from probably 4 or 5 years around that mark, depending again on how strong the growth is during that period of time. That is when you want to be getting into the market. So if we look at Perth, because I'm dealing in Perth, so if we look at Perth, Perth spent about 10 years kind of just in this zone here, really doing very little. In fact, the Perth property prices have really only just moved beyond the 2008 prices that they had then. So we've only got back to that point and just started to move beyond those numbers. So Perth is probably somewhere in here. We've come off the bottom now and we're starting to grow. We've had a couple of years of growth, all right? Maybe 18 months, something like that. And we're coming off, we've come off the bottom and we're into our next major growth cycle. The last one ended in around 2007, 2008, and it's been a long time between drinks. And a lot of people that invested at the last peak of the cycle have done pretty poorly over that last 12 or 14 years or so since we had our last major growth cycle. So if Perth is here, then we're actually in an ideal situation at the moment to be purchasing property in this neck of the woods. Now, the opposite of this is purchasing what I call it like the peak of the mountain here. So people can quite often buy in here, and that's because the market's been moving really strongly and it's gathered more and more momentum over the 3, 4, 5 year period, and it's getting towards the peak and people are getting excited. They feel like they're going to miss out. Homes are selling quicker, the media is really onto it, and people feel like, if they don't buy now, they're never going to get another opportunity to buy. And while that's kind of true in a certain sense, you don't want to be buying at this point of the market, because this is where the value is the least and the outlook is the worst. Okay, because now we've come through a major cycle here, and now it's going to peter out like this. It's going to take a break. That's what happens, all right? And that can be quite a few years. This is the time where you make your money in this kind of period here. So if we don't want to be buying up here, we want to be buying in down here somewhere. That's really ideally where we want to be buying at the beginning or just before the beginning of the new growth cycle. So although a lot of people are quite happy to jump into the market here, which is the worst time to be doing it, as I said, the value is the least, you've got the least value in the market and you've got the worst outlook. Down in these kind of areas here is when the outlook is the best and the value is also the best. Okay? So, but it's hard to get people to buy in here because It's the old adage. It's like when the market's not doing so well, people think it's never going to recover. And when it's doing really well, people think it's never going to stop. So both of those things are wrong. This is going to stop and this will recover because that's the cyclic nature of property. Now, if we were to extrapolate this out a bit, and I took this graph here of the growth cycle and we moved it up here, what basically happens over a longer period of time is then it takes a rest. It might go negative for a bit, depending on how strong this is. And then over a period of time, we'll get back to this growth cycle and it'll come up again. We'll have another major growth cycle. Okay, and on it goes. So we don't really want to be buying at these points here because you'll end up with a property that probably doesn't do anything for 10 years or so. And it might go up at some point. You might get some growth in it, but it'll kind of be more like the kind of trying to get the heartbeat going. It'll be a little bit up and then down and up and down, and you really won't get much difference between here and here. You want to be growing, you want to be buying at this point here and at this point here, okay? And you need to understand the market to do that. As I said, Perth at the moment, we're in the ideal situation just because of where our cycle is at the moment. And it's the right time to be buying into the market, to be getting the most benefit out of investing in property. Now, once we get to the peak, which is probably going to be 3 or 4 years down the track, you're going to have to start looking at outside of Perth to buy in a different area where the cycle is moving more in your favour. And contrary to most people's belief, when they talk about property in Australia, they generalise and they normally take Sydney and Melbourne and talk about them as kind of what's happening right across Australia, and people tend to think what they're talking about there is happening over here, but it's not. Darwin's different, Adelaide's different, Brisbane's different. We've all got our own cycles, so and they're operating at different times. So if we understand that, then we need to know that this is the ideal time to buy, and this is when you're going to get your most benefit out of it. The thing is here, you don't want to be waiting until it's getting up here and buying in, because you're losing out years of growth there, where you can be benefiting from it, and that's really the whole point of it. Okay, so make sure you buy well. Like I said, Perth at the moment, brilliant time to be doing it. But in a few years' time, it'll then be a no buy, and it'll be somewhere else. So if you find that interesting and you'd like to find out how this could possibly work for you, and to help your retirement, and to start a process that's running in the background that takes very little of your own time, very little of your own money, if any, then click on the link below the video here and you can have a free 30-minute consult with me, and we'll see how this process could work for you based on your own situation. All right, I hope that was helpful, and I hope to talk to you soon.